make me do that?
Going live.
Said we've already been live for 2 minutes. What is going on?
You're not live.
Do we have to repeat all that stuff? Okay, well, try now. It should be now.
Now we're live.
That shouldn't be on there.
Apologies, we're having some technical difficulties with the stream.
Apparently. I don't know why. It never made me do that before. Okay. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is we're actually live now. Thought we were live before. We already started talking, but welcome to Get the Mic. Why is that still up there?
Still having technical difficulties.
Oh, because I hit Alt-Tab. Okay, hold on. Are you satisfied? Yeah. I had to do all this, but it should be fine now.
I guess.
So can we start? Is that a thing?
I'm not trying to hold you back. Start us off.
You can start us off. I need a drink.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Get the Mic. This is episode 7. I'm your host on the right, Brok.
And I'm the host on your left, Owl.
And today we'll be talking about mainly the Ox King in Fire Mountain. It's a pretty exciting episode. I think it's going to get, significantly more mythological than it was previously. There's going to be quite a bit to talk about in this one, I think.
But before we get to that, I do want to preface what Get the Mic is, what our show's about. I kind of want to start each time. So let me go ahead and give a little spiel. We can get it down. We can write something down later. So Get the Mic is a podcast that analyzes the mythological aspects of different pieces of fiction. And we were joking before the stream, let's just say, even though we thought we were streaming, about how the first piece of fiction we chose was quite a large one, wouldn't you say?
I would say it's bigger than some we could talk about.
Yeah, I mean, we could have talked about Bagzerk.
We could have talked about Lord of the Rings, could have talked about really anything, but we decided to go straight for a series that's going to last us, about 150 episodes?
Of just Dragon Ball, there's
Yep.
140.
And then
There's about 100 episodes of Dragon Ball Z that I want to go through, although Cell may have some significance.
the longer I think about it, it seems that way.
Anyways, we'll see how far we get, but definitely these first seasons are very important. wanted to open up chat there. Okay, so that's right. We analyze pieces of fiction with a mythological lens, let's say. So today we're talking about episode 7, like my co-host Brok mentioned earlier. And that's mainly about the Ox King, but it also in the description of the video you should see it explains a little bit of what I think the main encapsulation is, or a very low resolution subject matter of the episode, which is an interface between the masculine, the feminine, and the ancestral.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even put the ancestral in there, but we're going to get to that. So any addendums that we have, I put this picture in. I just think Brok and I thought it was funny. Plus, I think it's important to note. And I guess we can go ahead and get into the episode if you're ready.
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. So Bluma here, it's important to say that when she is confronted, because this happens right after the rocket hits the camper, right? The bastion of symptom, let's say. Symptom.
The old simp bubble.
Right. And it's broken by Yamcha, who's been a mostly masculine figure, but like I think that he's very flawed masculine figure.
Right.
He's just a hierarchy above the next. Anything wrong?
No, I think that I think we had this originally when we were putting frames together. I think it's important because this is a good representation of what ultimately has happened for Bulma, where she's been very ignorant of what Yamcha's nature is besides what she notices when she's coming in and out of consciousness, essentially, on the past couple of episodes. So now that the bubble has been burst, it has completely discombobulated her.
Well, I don't actually know that it's been burst yet.
I wouldn't say it's been completely burst. It's more of a long-form process for Bulma, but...
Well, I mean, and the reason I put this in is because I think it is important that she's unconscious to a lot of the actions of Yamcha. It's the idea of Yamcha that she begins to like, right? It's not even him. She barely sees him once or twice.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's shy, but his character isn't actually shy. He's literally the opposite. Think about him later on in his character. He is not shy. Right.
Oh, yeah.
So what she has fallen in love with, let's say, is the idea of Yamcha.
Mm-hmm.
And so she has to be unconscious during this part. It's a willful unconsciousness displayed in a physical way in this instance.
I can kind of see what you're saying, though I don't know if it's a willful unconsciousness since she was literally knocked out by an RPG launched by Yamcha, as much as it was her.
Right, but what is that?
Something that knocked her out.
We were establishing, though, what that attack on the camper was, right, earlier. Mm-hmm. Metaphorically, let's say.
Right.
Or mythologically, let's say. So in this instance, mythologically here, the reason that this happens, the reason she gets knocked out or discombobulated from it, I don't think is that she has confronted it. I think that it's because she needs to be unconscious at this part. And it's willfully so.
All right.
Well, what do you have to say? Do you disagree?
I'm just not following you. That's all. She needs to be willfully unconscious here.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Because of what Yamcha does whenever this is happening. The time she's unconscious is when Yamcha is like tricking them and things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when they have their second fight also. She's never seen him fight Goku.
I mean, it also serves the purpose for sure here that...
Which is another reason because he's never emasculated in front of her. Because she chooses not to see it. But keep going.
No, I'm following what you're saying there.
Okay.
I was thinking more just in the context of this. But yes, outside of the context of specifically just this frame, she is now unconscious for the end of the episode yet again. As a direct sort of consequence of, Yamcha's masculinity arriving, so to speak, in this scene.
Mm-hmm.
And so...
Okay, I'm glad you follow now. I didn't want to move on without having said my piece on that.
Right.
Okay, so anything you want to add?
No.
Okay, let's move on. So I wanted to post this, or I wanted to have this shot in our little slideshow. I think it's funny. It's an encapsulation of let's say the masculine hardship of providing for the feminine in a humanistic society, or a mythological approach.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when she's unconscious, because I mean, let's talk about Sleeping Beauty in this case, right? When Aurora goes to sleep, the rest of the story is about Philip, her masculine consciousness.
Right, and in this scene, Bulma is literally being carried by this masculine form. I love this frame too. It's just like everything's kind of packed in all at once together. We can see Oolong's reaction to it. We see Goku's just determination. He's like, nope, this is just what I've got to do. And then we see Bulma just
She's
pass
still
out.
Unconscious, by the way. This is after the camper attack, or this is like they've been inside the camper. She's still unconscious. Just so we're aware, like.
Yeah, she went unconscious in the camper.
Mm-hmm. And this is right after that. Anything else you had to say? I just wanted to point this out because it's kind of relevant to some things I've heard online that I don't necessarily agree with, that are saying girls have it easier because like they don't have to do manual labor, things like that. But that's it. I think the point of this is that it's both. You need that duality to succeed, ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
And notice, Oolong's cheering him on. Oolong is a cheery fellow in this episode. Towards the end. Once he's gone through, and that was a lot of Oolong, I would say, last episode.
Yeah.
I think we're going to do an episode at the end of the season to recap a lot of the important parts. And
I was going to say that we should probably do something along that line for probably each season.
Yeah. Possibly more for the Red Ribbon arc. It's really long. Kind of long. All right, let's move on here. Oops, that was back. So Mount Fry Pans. I don't even want to try and say that. I'm just gonna say the Ox King on Fire Mountain.
Gyumao.
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 Well, there it is. We tried.
We're just going to be calling this Fire Mountain throughout the episode.
Fire Mountain, and we're gonna say Ox King. I mean, we've been using some dub, some sub, some.
Yeah, most of our terminology came from our rewatch, which was all in the dub. But going through and grabbing these screenshots and seeing the differences from the subs, it's definitely pointed out to us that, well, the intention behind the scenes is much clearer in the dub, in the sub.
Yes, and some of the voice acting is really worthwhile, I would say. Anyways, so the title and the significance of this title screen: a castle surrounded by fire. So this particular castle, what is in a castle, right? What is in a castle?
What is in a castle? A king is in a castle.
What does a king have?
Treasure, ultimately.
Yeah, treasure. There we go. So that's what I was really getting at. Like treasure, power, something of value. Value is in a castle, right? Because
Ultimately, yes.
castles are made around things for value. Now, what about the fire around it?
Is chaos.
Mm-hmm.
Not only chaos, but a chaos that's just consistently burning nonstop.
Right. And we're going to get into the exact explanation, which, yeah, we'll get to it here soon. But, right. So if we're looking at it that way, we can see a lot of significance already, but let's move on. I don't want to get too into it too far. So last time, on the last episode, let's say they were heading towards the 6th Dragon Ball, so they only need 2 more. And this is how they're heading that way in the car that Yamcha gave them, right?
Right. Oolong is driving. Bulma is forever the passenger, so she's chilling.
Well, I was also going to say we should have got that. As an addendum, we should have got that radar from his car. Forgot to. It's fine. Right. Oolong's driving. Simp obviously doing the work. He was driving the camper as well. Bluma's kicking back. And they're headed that way. But also headed that way is Yamcha.
Yes, so Yamcha is tracking them in this car that they were just like, oh, it's a gift. Better not look a gift horse in the mouth. And they're just taking it. So Yamcha here has his tracking device, and he's just following them. And he has decided, well, I honestly don't have to do any of the work. They're just going to do it for me. And then I'll just steal it at the end. So that's why he's saying here, what I want, I get. That's my motto.
Well, I think it's also significant to note that his radar looks like a dragon radar. It's a faux dragon radar. It's something that'll lead you in a direction, but it's not towards enlightenment, let's say.
Right. It's just leading him in the direction of the main characters who are on this journey.
Well,
rather than leading
in
him
a
to the
way
Dragon
it
Balls.
is. In a way it is, but his actually no, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. So yeah, okay. So even though it's like a faux dragon radar, right? It's leading him in a direction. It doesn't matter the direction you point yourself at. If you point yourself at something and commit to it, even if it's a fake thing at first, you can fake it till you make it, until you actually are trying at it, right? Maybe you'll actually enjoy it. But I think that's what this is saying, because then eventually Yamcha will find enlightenment on this path, right?
Mm-hmm. He just has not oriented himself towards his own journey. I would say he's more oriented towards what he can get from the journey that the other characters are on. So his method is clearly morally flawed, but he at least has a plan and a direction.
And I think that speaks to an issue, especially right now, these days, where everyone's cooped up inside, that it's hard to point yourself at something in that instance.
And it's a time of a lot of uncertainty.
You could say that again. I wanted to point out this sub though. What I want, I get. That's my motto. So we've seen some humbling in Yamcha last episode, but again, this episode, he is trying to act more ruthless, let's say, than he is.
It's definitely a lot of bravado in this episode from Yamcha.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And in this instance, that is true. I mean, it's this motto is actually, I don't think, ever brought up again.
No, it's definitely not his motto.
No, it's not
his motto is, I'm going to use my wolf fang fist.
What's the problem? I'll use my wolf fang fist.
Oh, we'll get to that.
But we'll get to that. So we also see along the way, and this is going to be, I think, the only interlude we have from the Pilaf gang, right?
Yeah, I don't think they accomplish anything else in this episode.
So I wanted to point out this here, that if Pilaf was kind and conciliatory towards the parts of himself that he is a tyrant over, then they would actually be grateful.
They would actually help him. Maybe they wouldn't be so useless to him.
They would be able to help him, right?
Mm-hmm.
They can't help him, and this goes to say, like, you can't rule over yourself like that, right?
That you can't dominate aspects of yourself without incorporating them.
Right. It won't actually happen. Like, if let's say you're trying to diet and you force yourself to diet, if you don't get rid of the things that made you gain weight in the first place, you're not going to keep the weight off, right?
Right. And if you don't have, let's say, a good reason to diet other than maybe a superficial one, it's also extremely difficult to stay on that path, and you'll have to discipline yourself constantly.
Yeah, but developing discipline is not the same as, like, being a tyrant over yourself.
Well,
like,
I shouldn't say discipline.
mm-hmm.
You will have to reprimand and try to control aspects of yourself in that way. That is, I would say, not very conducive to accomplishing the goal in a way that will actually satisfy you.
Well, you can wear yourself out, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Or even better, you can burn yourself out, for a later reference to this episode.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a good way to put it.
If you are a tyrant over yourself. So here I just wanted to reference that this little charade that they do, and it's important that it's in here because it's showing that if he reconciled with these parts of himself, they would be grateful and he would be a more complete person.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny scene because they are, I think it's the first time we really see them talking about their relationship with Pilaf. Up until now, it's pretty much just like, yes, master, subservient. We see them accomplishing what he wants them to accomplish, or just failing it. But the dynamic with him has mostly just been, yes, sir, no, sir, I'll do what you want, run away and try to do something. So we finally get a little bit of dialogue between them to see how they feel about the situation with Pilaf, right? And I think that's important for Pilaf's character so that we can see what this aspect of himself, I would say what both of these aspects of himself feel about himself. And so they're sitting here saying, oh, it would just be so great if we could be in harmony and we could be appreciated.
Yeah, not ordered around and punished.
Mm-hmm.
You know, those would all be good things to start. Don't punish yourself when you fail. Maybe
Right.
That's a good place to start.
I think that's a good place to start because of where this is going to end up.
Before that, though, we do want to briefly talk about Pilaf's castle.
Mm-hmm.
It's the first time we've seen it, right?
I think so.
Yeah. So Pilaf's castle. Remember what we said about castles before? There's treasure inside of castles.
Yes.
Right. Dragons guard treasure as well. We've already spoken about that briefly. May speak about that more. But it's significant to note the mushrooms as well in this area. So you've heard about some of the theories of human consciousness coming about through fungal ingestion, right?
Oh, sure. You know, the stoned ape sort of, well, it's not even much of a theory as much as it's something that we can trace back.
But I think it's important that in this first season, we see that there is treasure in a castle guarded, well, not guarded, but surrounded by these mushrooms that could bring that revelatory experience, which I think is exactly what happens later on here to foreshadow it.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also just important to point out that the castle is just located here in the middle of the desert. It's not like it's not in civilization. It's not, if it was surrounded by water, or if it was in the forest, or if it was in a kingdom, it would mean something different, I think, than here, where it's this secluded castle in the middle of the desert.
I agree. And I think it's significant that Pilaf has his castle here, and there's nothing around except for these mushrooms. The opportunity for him to be enlightened. He's surrounded by it.
If he would only look outward
mm-hmm.
rather than inward in his domain.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
You could say the things that he has, or what he wants to have, since we're talking about what a castle can represent symbolically, right? So he's out here in the desert, in the castle that he's constructed, in the away from civilization and away from certain other elements, and it's sort of a way to say, like, it's almost an extension of Yamcha, but this is a more pitiful, I would say, version of Yamcha, because Yamcha is on a path and he wants to become better. His wish is about bettering himself so that he can do something that he wants to do rather than just have something. And so here he is in the desert with a whole castle he's built out of, well, want.
Fair. A castle fueled by false ambition, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But now we're going to talk about punishing yourself. So here we see Pilaf indulging in front of his subordinates. And I think it's worthy of mentioning that he's not feeding them or something. I think that's in this scene.
Sorry, what was that?
Is he not feeding them?
Well, he makes a joke in this
Is he literally
scene.
not feeding them?
Well, they came back and they had made a joke about it would be so nice if he would just let us stop and have some hot soup or something and say, "Well, you tried." And so it's kind of a funny joke because they come in and he's having this whole feast. And
right. I think later on he decides not to feed them or shoo at some point, something like that. But go on.
So they walk in and it's like immediately what they see is him feasting when they've been wandering the desert, and they're like, it would just be so nice if we could, how would I want to put it? If that indulgence could be shared with us, and I don't even want to call it just indulgence, but this sustenance could be shared with us. And
it's like the
them
blessings, right? Like he just has this stuff. We never saw him earn this stuff. This is like the blessings of his being that's not being shared out. The nourishment of his being is not being shared out to his subordinate personas, let's say.
Right. You could say that they are not being given what they need to become strong enough to develop that nourishment.
And that's another reason why Shu's super small.
Mm-hmm.
So, right, we see that here. He's surrounded by food, and then he decides to do this. He is kind of like the kid in a class that will try really hard on a test and fail and then beat themselves up about it. In the sense that you can only, like, if you tried your best, that's all you can do, right? You shouldn't beat yourself up about it. But in this instance, right, he is obsessed with getting this thing, but he's not willing to take any real action to get it. He's not willing to take any action himself to get it.
Well, he's not willing to take the responsibility of doing what's necessary to get it. He's sending out these sort of ill-formed aspects of himself, and rather than nourishing those aspects of himself to try to get there, then when he doesn't get what he wants, he first mocks them and then punishes them. The way that he punishes them here is he has these robotic arms come out and hold them up, and then he opens the ceiling of the castle and causes a thunderstorm to appear and strike them with lightning. So, would
you say they're a little singed, a little burned there?
Maybe a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that there is a specific significance to the fact that it is a thunderstorm that he hits them with? It seems odd. He could just electrocute them, but in this instance, he opens the roof of the castle up so that a thunderstorm appears above them and then strikes them.
He actually makes the thunderstorm as well.
Right. Because I'm not drawing a necessarily a line with it, but I always feel like I need to point these things out if I think that
they could be. Sure.
It doesn't have a necessarily logical foundation, right? In this instance, it's like that's a strange thing to be able to do, to call down a thunderstorm on yourself.
Is that a strange thing to do? You've never done that? Metaphorically call down a thunderstorm on yourself? You've never really beaten yourself up?
Well, I mean, I think that's what it ultimately means, right? But I just meant the imagery of the thunderstorm.
Right. I don't know. I think it's somewhat pertinent. I think it's somewhat matching with the symbology of what we're talking about.
Well, I guess let's pick it out a little bit, right? And so the idea of a thunderstorm coming down, like you summon it down from the sky as sort of this almost, how to put it, like the wrath of your logos, or maybe
almost divine. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it's well, I think lightning has been seen as sort of a divine wrath or a divine judgment type thing. It's fire that comes directly out of the sky, right? And so I think that him calling a thunderstorm in that sense is, on an archetypal level, more I think more akin to that elevated logos or divine thought that can be pointed at yourself for harm because of the potency of it.
Pilaf is not embodying the logos very well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it is, I guess it is that let's say super ego that Pilaf is imposing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Upon these two other aspects of himself.
Well,
it's hard to say. I hadn't thought about it like that.
Well, I think that the metaphor might hold up a bit more given what happens next, right? Which is that he wants to call down this thing to hit these aspects of himself as a punishment, and it weakens them rather than strengthens them.
And let's be more specific about what Mind Shu represent again.
Mind Shu being the inherent masculine and feminine aspects of Pilaf, right? That, if incorporated, would be the things that could strengthen him in character to, well, let's say, go gather the Dragon Balls himself.
Yeah, find his own path. Instead, he's relying on being a tyrant and
well, he's relying entirely on the ego, right? And right. These are the deeper aspects of himself that he thinks that should be subject to his ego.
I just don't know if it is because he's I don't think he's embodying the Logos enough to be able to do what you're saying he might be doing.
Well, I don't really mean it in that he is embodying the Logos. I would say, I just use the word Logos a little bit more loosely there to represent that, the imagery of the elevated aspect of the sky. And
I mean, it could be a perversion of that power that he's calling it down.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's basically what it is.
I mean, I think it just trying to find the way to articulate it, but it's ultimately calling down this this powerful thing from, well, I don't want to say the cosmos, but calling down fire from the sky onto an aspect
you're right,
of
the
himself.
sky. Yeah. No, I can see some of what you're saying, but it is a perversion of it, right? It's a perversion of that power, and you can only he only wields that against himself because you can only wield that against that kind of power.
I was going to say the same thing, that I want to say that now, but I can't remember for sure everything that he does later in the season.
He doesn't shock anyone.
But I don't think he does this to anybody. No. I think that this is a punishment reserved for himself.
Mm-hmm. And that's what we see.
In his own failure, right? Because, as we see, he is gesturing with his fork, the thing that he is using to indulge himself rather than, feed them, and is also stricken by this way of thinking.
I don't know if it's the way of thinking. It's I would say it's the Pilaf's divine will and physically manifested, and he is burnt out, right, by this. All three aspects of him get burnt out by doing this to himself, which is what I was saying earlier, right? Mm-hmm. He's exhausted energy because he's done this to himself. It's counterproductive, right?
Right, and it happens here in, if you think of Mai and Shu as an extension of him, this is something that he does alone, that nobody witnesses. It's just him in the aspects of himself, right? And that reinforces the idea that this is really a representation of him just attacking himself for the concept of failure.
Mm-hmm. And he also doesn't learn from his mistakes.
Oh, obviously.
And that is also counterproductive. It's why he gets shocked, because you can wield the Logos in a perverted way, but it's still going to try and set you on the right path. This should be a sign for Pilaf, by the way. And what I was saying earlier about the metaphor with the student, or the analogy with the student, is that's what students will do. They'll burn themselves out studying for all these tests and doing all these projects and things.
Well,
they'll get burnt out because
they're not doing it for a reason that they can align with. They're doing it because
they're trying to be a tyrant over those aspects, right?
Dominate their whims and tell themselves what to do to accomplish.
Can get the grade.
Well, they're doing it for the grade,
right,
rather than for the knowledge or for the wisdom. And so, in the same way, your Pilaf is doing what he's doing for the things, to get something rather than to grow.
Right.
And so, by being a tyrant to himself to just to reach an end, it requires a level of criticism that can only be turned on yourself ultimately.
And that's what we've seen here.
Mm-hmm.
So let's continue. I grabbed this because it's just funny how far apart they are. It's the I would say the blindness of naivety. This is the first time they've ever been tracked. Yamcha's the first major antagonist of the series, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we see Pilaf in episode 2, 3, something like that. But I mean, it's just Pilaf's crew. He's never met Goku yet. Or am I wrong?
I don't remember.
I think that's correct.
But yeah, I think that it's funny because, you know, they're obviously distracted by the sight of Fire Mountain. But it's also just hilarious that there are these the show's very efficient, and so they try to pack as much in, it seems, as they can in some of these shots, and I think that's because it's representative of the way that it was laid out in the manga. So in a shot like this, rather than us having like two separate shots of them in one place and then maybe Yamcha off in a different place and maybe over his shoulder so you can see that he's seeing them, it's like, no, he's literally just right there. He's following them about 30 feet away. So it is a situation now where also Owl has pointed out that you can read a lot into the show by where people are looking and where they're pointing themselves. And here we can see it's just, he's not looking at Fire Mountain, which I would expect Yamcha to be at least startled by Fire Mountain or that he would have something to say to Poir about how imposing or terrifying it is. And he has like a small thing to say, just like, I don't know if we can do that. But really, he's looking at Goku and Bulma and Oolong.
Yeah, it's his ultimate goal, and that's why he's able to go. That drive is what keeps you able to confront challenging things, let's say frightening things as well.
Mm-hmm. And he says, I think it's in this scene, that hopefully he can fight Goku once he's been softened up by the Ox King. So he's still just thinking about what he's oriented towards, which is, well, besting Goku for the Dragon Balls.
He also does want to best Goku at some point. He has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder against Goku at this point.
Oh, definitely. When they have their second fight, he's got a gun on him, and Goku's like, well, I'm going to fight you anyway, and then he immediately gets rid of the gun because he's like, well, I have to keep fighting Goku. Like, I can't I think he says, I can't turn down the chance to fight Gohan's grandson again, or something along those lines.
And so we do see that sparkle of good character in Yamcha, which we don't see in Pilaf still.
Oh, definitely not.
So, right, it is inside. It is the treasure that he's stolen from all over the place. So, the treasure that's in the mountain that we've confirmed now, right? There's treasure in the mountain. And the reason they're going there is because the treasure is the 6th Dragon Ball. Now, I think it's significant to see that the Enlightenment is guarded by a castle and chaotic flames. But and I think we're about to get into this. Right after this, the explanation, right? Hold on. Let me go on. Okay, here we go. I want to talk about this first. So, this is exactly where I was saying the Ox King is not in his castle. So, what happens when a king is not in his castle?
It is not guarded. And it is not, how to put it? It is not tended to.
It's absent of order, right?
Yes.
And that's why the fire is there, because he's gone from his castle. He has neglected his duty, let's say.
Right, which is why here Oolong is saying the mountain erupted in flames while he was on a picnic with his kid. Now, there was a line before
right,
this.
that's what I was wanting you to talk about. Go ahead.
There's a line before this where he says that a spirit of fire came down and essentially lit the mountain on fire, and as a result, it has never gone out. And I think that's pretty symbolic of what has happened, the spirit of fire. You could say that the spirit of chaos came down upon his kingdom while he was absent. And calling it a spirit in that sense, it's basically like saying it wasn't just set on fire. The idea of fire has now encapsulated the mountain. The idea of the chaos now stands there and will not stop being there until it's tended to.
And we'll see how it's tended to here next episode. But it's significant to note that if you're not taking care of things at home, let's say, then you're going to surround your home or your kingdom, let's say, with chaos.
Your domain.
Yeah, exactly. And so Oolong is terrified here. Obviously, the Ox King, which we'll get into him just shortly on what he's representative, how he represents some very important archetypes. But do you have anything else to say about Oolong here?
He's just scared because he's Oolong. He's been saying up until this point, it's a suicide mission. We shouldn't come here. He really, really doesn't want to come here. He's saying that the Ox King is terrifying and he kills anyone who gets near the mountain because he's defending his treasure. And he's like, Goku just doesn't stand a chance. No one stands a chance. This is just death. And so here he is giving a little bit of backstory as a preface as to why he's so scared.
Fair. And I think that pretty much covers it. But I think also the idea of someone who has gained respectable status in order to have their own kingdom, castle, treasure, who then abandons their responsibility is, let's say, more terrifying than Yamcha, who's like a college kid who abandoned his responsibility.
Right, the level of responsibility of a mountain with a castle on top is a bit different from the cave that Yamcha has been stuffing with the things that he steals from people. And also there's an assumption that we're making here, right? Because Oolong paints the actions of the Ox King defending the treasure as he is this terrifying, frightening person who is very malicious. Because how else would he see it right now?
How else would he see it? But how else would Oolong see it? He's terrified of his own shadow.
True. He sees an imposing masculine figure that can do serious harm, and he sees that as something to fear,
to flee from, right? And so he tries to run away. He doesn't think that someone on a righteous path would even be strong enough to confront this masculine spirit who's abandoned responsibility.
Right, and that's to say that the accomplishments of having that castle in the first place sets him on a level that is above Goku. So the implication that he had a kingdom and a castle, I guess you should say, to begin with, and even though it is on fire, he has kept people away from it. That automatically would make him more threatening than Goku, which he's obviously not correct about technically.
We'll see how they match up, but
so yeah, he's out. He's just like, this is impossible.
Right, he's saying someone who has already conquered some chaos and carved their own piece of order within it is way stronger, let's say,
than the idea that Goku represents.
Because Goku hasn't had the actions yet, the accomplishments, the feats, the deeds are not there.
Well, he doesn't have a castle.
Right, not yet. He'll have his own castle one day. So, no matter how strong Goku is, he's no match for the Ox King. And so he tries to run away, and what happens? But I don't think we have the shots of this, but Bulma stops him.
Goku and Bulma both stop him.
Using the same tactic they've been using.
Same method as always.
Simp control.
Yep, they call him for what he is, and he says something along the lines of, "Fine, I'll go with you if you'll just stop doing that."
Yeah.
And so that's about all it took.
He's pretty wrangled in now.
Yeah, he can't even jump into a car and drive away. He is not allowed to flee from this confrontation.
Yeah, because his thought beckons, let's say.
Well, his shame beckons him.
Hey, it's a powerful
It's a motivator.
Yeah, for sure. So the next scene we see is very interesting. There's a purple T-Rex chasing our newest character who we meet before the Ox King, and that is Chi-Chi. I'm curious to hear your analysis of Chi-Chi.
I like this idea of Chi-Chi because we're going beyond just the really basic, fundamental masculine and feminine archetypal. Just like this is what the man do. This is what the woman do. So we see a great representation of masculinity in a feminine character, which is to say that she has bite to her and has character, and also that how do I want to word this? That she don't need no man. She is already sort of nested into her own hierarchy in the same way that Goku was when it started. So early on, we see Goku do a very similar thing in slaying one of these dinosaurs with ease, and Chi-Chi is able to do the same. And I think that's because it says something about how Chi-Chi's character aligns with Goku's at the beginning of this story. But she's being chased by a purple dinosaur instead of a green dinosaur. Which, I mean, I guess you could pretty easily delineate that to be a just to say, like, she is confronting her own dragon of chaos. It's a purple one though, because she girl.
I mean, Goku's wearing purple. I don't know if it's necessarily saying anything. I mean, you could delineate that.
Well, it's the same color as her pink helmet and gloves and boots. Pinkish purple.
What I mean more, okay, so this, yeah, in this instance, it is the moral strength of an archetypal and truthful female path. That's why she's able to destroy dragons left and right, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Well, she's honest with herself.
Mm-hmm. And so that moral strength is what's on display here, and it astounds someone who's watching.
Well, I also just had wanted to point out, though, that, like, it's very common that when you're looking at something like this and you're trying to make an archetypal or a mythological analysis about the masculine and feminine, I've heard multiple times criticisms that are like, well, this doesn't have any space to talk about femininity. It's all just about men. It's all about masculinity, and it's I don't think that's the case. I just think that people don't quite understand that that the same moral character for these archetypal figures, it applies to the masculine and the feminine equally, and having a situation where a feminine character acts in a way that is technically masculine is simply a reflection of the fact that all the way down at the bottom of archetypal analysis, confronting and exploring and mapping and sort of claiming a domain is a masculine act. So, like, destroying this purple dragon of chaos, while technically a masculine act, is not necessarily masculine on the level that we're talking about. It's sort of a masculine representation of femininity so that it can show the power of it.
Well, right, and I think it's also the power of forthrightness, and we're gonna see how Chi-Chi's like that in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go on then to see that. So I wanted to get this. I love this. This frame's so funny. So she decapitates it, destroys the remains with a laser. Right? She has some, let's say, psionic abilities with this helmet.
I think the helmet is really interesting. I don't have any analysis of it yet, but the idea, it makes me think of the power pole in a sense, because, you know, when we start out, Goku...
it's very reminiscent.
Well, in the first episode, Goku, we had said that he slayed this dragon with his power pole, right? And it reached all the way to it and hit it in the air. And in this situation, Chi-Chi is afraid of this... I'm just going to call it a dragon because that's what it is. She's afraid of this dragon even though she has defeated it. And even though she is afraid, what she has that is magical from the beginning can hit it from a distance and eliminate it without her having to actually approach it and do so. And I think that's not dissimilar to what the power pole can do.
Right. And I mean, we don't get any background on how she gets the helmet, but if we assume that she got her from her father, which I guess we can because it's a horned helmet and then a horn bladed.
Well, it's a bladed helmet and a horn helmet, yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. And I mean, we can go from there and say that it's that ancestral strength that she relies on, because she also closes her eyes when she throws the blade at the beginning, if you notice.
Right. And it almost seems to like surprise her, like it snaps back to her, and she doesn't watch for it or anything. She just like closes her eyes, throws it out. It does what it's supposed to do and immediately comes back to her. And the combination of that and the laser is just so similar to what the power pole does, you know.
Mm-hmm. Except this just obliterates.
Yeah, this is extremely powerful.
Mm-hmm. And that's to say that the female spirit is extremely powerful when wielding that archetypal.
Well, it's something that Yamcha says,
strength.
because Yamcha witnesses this happen, and what he says is that he says something along the lines of that he can't believe that she was able to do that even though she was scared. And I think a part of the point of this inherited ancestry is that she has this kind of power without necessarily embodying the courage that a more masculine character like Goku does.
But she doesn't need to have that. She has no bravado. She doesn't need it. Yeah, exactly.
Which is to say that the inherited feminine ancestral spirit doesn't need that.
Right. And so, but when that young, because she does embody the spirit of a feminine, but a feminine period in one's life, let's say. It's that young path, the young pubescent path that she is following here. And so I just wanted to point out that it's only a particular period that she's embodying right now, and we'll get to later on, what her character is as a whole. Mm-hmm. But right now...
It'll be a little while.
But right now, I want to just leave it at that. And so when this spirit of the young feminine encounters the fledgling masculine spirit of Yamcha, she's unable to resist the strength, right, of this character. Meaning, young women, right, can easily fall prey to even fledgling sluggers like Yamcha.
Yeah.
And so here, that's exactly what happens. She gets knocked unconscious, and Poir looks on, if you wanted to mention that.
Oh, yeah, Poir is just horrified by... Well, I want to say horrified, but looks horrified, but is
confused, like,
but just like shocked
yeah,
that this has happened. It's interesting because I like the idea of this as an intro to Chi-Chi, because she is in this domain that she has conquered, this more natural domain, right? And immediately when she encounters something that doesn't belong in this domain, right? Here's the desert bandit. He's not in the desert now. He is something that she encounters. She immediately attacks, and he just dodges and hits her, and she's unconscious. And so it's kind of saying that, like, following her encounter with this type of masculinity, even though she is united in herself and is strong of character, she is put unconscious by what he can do.
Even if you are at this young age, you're still not powerful enough to, let's say not powerful enough, but let's say knowledgeable or wise enough, rather, to outwit someone who is further along, let's say, even if they've made poor choices in the past. That experience has actually amounted to something.
Right. It's not without its own merit. Even if it isn't the same thing as riding the Nimbus to collect the Dragon Balls. It still will give you power over good, not just good people, but I would say less experienced good people.
Right. It's a hierarchy. He's a hierarchy or two above her in development.
Mm-hmm.
So his wisdom to her is just overwhelming and knocks her on her ass, let's say. So from there, we get this amazing sub. Yeah, because I ain't into little kids. So Poir asks Yamcha why he wasn't nervous around Chi-Chi. And I think that's exactly it, is because she's a couple hierarchies below him anyways. And to him, Bulma is several hierarchies above him.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Bulma is traveling with Goku. And I don't think that necessarily by itself does, but she is, she already has a plan, so to speak. She's got her dragon radar. She has accomplished things. She has a lot of potential that she demonstrates just through different acts, and so that feminine spirit is it is very effective on someone in the hierarchy that Yamcha is in, whereas like a younger girl who we'll see is cute according to other characters too, does not strike that fear or that inspiration in Yamcha.
Well, yeah, and that's because when he sees her, he doesn't think that he could be more. He thinks that this is like a little kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when he sees Bulma, and like last time when he saw Bulma's breast, let's say, that was an eye-opening experience for him, because that meant that he needed to be worthy of attaining that, since he obtained it in an unworthy way, let's say.
Right.
And so there's nothing really here, even though, let's say, Chi-Chi has a bikini on, not to say to sexualize her in any way, but there's nothing there for Yamcha. He is not into that, let's say, is what he says.
He ain't into little kids.
Ain't into little kids, so I just wanted to mention that. But yeah, that's how their first encounter plays out. And I think that's what I had in the description about the interface in the masculine with the masculine and the feminine, is that here we see the archetypal youth, the archetypal female youth interacting with what is essentially an adolescent, but several hierarchies above, and getting floored by the encounter, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Here it is, the castle. So this is Bulma looking at the castle. Obviously, it goes back to them. They are the base of Fire Mountain, and I love the ruined and disheveled nature of everything around it.
Yeah, I like this situation that they've stumbled into where, it's not just a fire mountain and a castle. It's like a ruined kingdom around a fire mountain and a castle.
And that's the idea, I think, that when you've let your responsibilities go, the chaos that it ensues can be so overwhelming that even you can't find a way around it. Like, even the Ox King with all his strength can't find his way around the chaos that's engulfed his kingdom.
Right, and so everything surrounding it has sort of... It looks essentially now like a battleground for the people who have come to claim the treasure that is not owned by anybody now, technically.
Well, what do you think about the people who have tried to come claim the treasure?
What do I think about the people who have come to claim the treasure?
All the ones who have died, because we see lots of corpses around, right?
I don't think that those people would necessarily be considered evil or immoral technically. What they see in Fire Mountain is a challenge to overcome, to claim something that was lost, that doesn't belong to anybody. Because if it did, then the Ox King would be up there in his castle rather than down here just trying to keep people away from it. So it's I think that it's the inevitability of people to gravitate towards the process that would be claiming the treasure for establishing order out of chaos. They see a great chaos and a great treasure, and I don't think that makes them bad characters, but he considers them thieves because even though he's not up in his castle, he still desperately wants to get it back, and ultimately, we'll see, to stop this all from happening.
Right, and I want to reframe to say that the reason that he lost his castle was a lack of that responsibility. Those coming to seek the treasure inside are not coming with responsibility, and the reason I would say the Ox King obliterates all the ones that come to try and challenge him is because he's several hierarchies above them, even outside of his castle.
Right. I think that says just something about the nature of the character too, that it isn't the castle that puts him in that hierarchy. He is in that hierarchy, and that's why he had the castle, right? And so just coming to claim a castle for yourself that you have not established doesn't put you on the same level as someone who has been able to do that.
And then lost it. And that is the moral weakness we see in the Ox King, is that he lost it. And we'll get into that in a minute. But I do like this frame here for sure.
I like this frame for sure. I like the audio even more in the Japanese, which is just this this terrible screaming from Goku, because Bulma asks him if he can just fly up there and get the ball with his Nimbus. And he's like, sure. he's playing with a skull, and then he just drops it, hops on the Nimbus. I think there's a funny little frame there too. I didn't want to grab it or anything. I didn't think it was significant, but it's almost like this weird interplay where Bulma does the sort of like, she kind of like bats her eyelashes at Goku, and she's like, "You'll do this, won't you?" And Goku, oblivious completely to the feminine wiles that I think she is just pulling out by default, just goes, "Okay, sure." And like she gets what she wants, but not for the reason that she thinks, I suppose.
Right.
But it's such a small little moment, but I think funny and representative of the characters where they are. And so he flies up here, thinking that he can. Now this is where it gets really interesting to me because I haven't really thought about this, but Goku thinking that he can take the Nimbus up all the way to the castle and just, well, take the Dragon Ball is wrong. Does not work.
Right, and this is so you said you haven't really thought about this.
I'm thinking about it right now, but yeah.
I have thought about it. This is actually in my opinion the first time that the, let's say, personas of Goku and the Ox King clash. The idea of being on the path, the divinity of pointing yourself in truth and forthrightness to get to your destination, right? It is not alone powerful enough to overcome the chaos of, let's say, established or lost established order. This is a very pro-traditional story. It's here.
I think it's extremely traditional, and I think that the fact that it catches Goku on fire when he tries to go over it says something about Goku's vulnerability to something that is just it's. I think that this hierarchy is multiple tiers above him. And so because of that,
right, exactly.
He can't, even though logically he should just be able to go up over it. It doesn't happen that way because the real story is about the fact that he is not there yet, and that he has progression to.
Well, I want to point out something that we both somewhat have knowledge of, and that's the Roman Empire. So the fall of the Roman Empire, the lost responsibility of that, right? That chaos that ensued cannot be put out by one person pointing themselves in that direction. It is only by doing some later actions that we'll see that will allow that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this and I think it's also significant to point out that this is not the first time it's happened. The Banjo fan, which we'll mention later on as well, has been known to put out these specific fires. This is almost an ancestral issue, the rise and fall, right, of order and chaos. And it's not enough for someone simply pointing themselves forthrightly towards it to be able to fix it. You have to do something later on, which we'll see, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is divine in and of itself. So, yeah, Goku's not strong enough. Not even close. Boom. I love this picture. I love it.
Oh, this is such a great picture. Want to point out, it looks like our chat's not working, even though it looks like it's working now. So, another degree of chat problems.
Oh, God. Hold on.
But I really do love so many of these frames because they. I mean, you can definitely tell that this is based on a well-established manga because when you look at something like this shot, it reads so well as a panel out of a manga. I mean, they're just trying to pause it real quick and grab a frame for a point. It's sort of an undeniable thing that I think I pointed this out when we were talking about Roshi originally, and we had this frame of Roshi with the Dragon Ball around his neck and the wave behind him. And you can take these frames and see the care that was put into the individual frames because, well, the care was put in there when it was drawn. I think there's a lot of purposeful stuff packed into these frames because of that. And I don't know if it becomes less so further down the line or maybe when we get to Z, but here I just wanted to point that out real quick, that this is we don't really spend much time trying to find these frames. It's just like, bam, there it is. And then so we end up with these just automatically.
Oh, I definitely want to talk to Chris Somber's point about how the Ox King differs from a dragon guarding its gold. The Ox King is not a dragon. He's not chaos to be conquered. Well, he is an agent of order that has lost his way, lost the means. He's kind of a boomer, let's say.
Yeah.
In our terms, he's kind of a boomer, right? He's lost the tools to be able to combat the chaos in his own time.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's not a dragon. He's not chaos to be conquered.
Well, I think we'll get to that, but I have some thoughts on that.
Which we think, right? When we first see him in the Oolong Mount Frypan flash forward like 3 episodes ago, we saw a visage of him that looked like he was draconic, right?
Well, he
demonic.
Almost looked like the mountain itself. He was he's painted in these red strokes and towering, and he was in a sense the flaming chaos mountain, as he was depicted. I do want to say before we move on though, I like that point that Chris Somber brought up about the storm in the desert harming him when it could be something beneficial to the desert, and I want to come back to that maybe towards the end of the episode.
Okay. But anyways, back to this point here. So Bluma's standing around, and slam, bam, there's the axe.
Comes crashing in.
Of the Ox King.
So also in this frame, I do want to point out that, I mean, if the Ox King wanted to, Bulma would just be dead. This is a warning shot from him.
Again, not a dragon.
Mm-hmm.
And so it also, you could see through her hair that her eyes are very open. She's very conscious right now of all of her vulnerabilities because she's about to encounter. It's a very complicated idea. It's the oh man, we're gonna get to it. So I don't want to jump the gun, but right here we see Bluma is quite conscious. She's conscious, and her mouth's even wide open. She's very much in awe of what is going on around her. I also want to point out the whole tone of this is so apocalyptic, which is why I was bringing up the fall of Rome, because that loss of responsibility, right? Mm-hmm. That is so enormous, and it is the duty to. Well, we'll get to what the Ox King means, but right, it's a failed duty to the society.
Right, and the weight of that failure.
It's a pretty big weight.
This is great. Another great panel.
Yeah, I love this one. Do you know why I chose it?
Is it because their eyes are open?
It's because the first thing we see is the scrutinization of this masculine spirit, the judgment being applied by I think it's safe to say that the social masculine spirit, that's what the Ox King is. The masculine spirit of society that he instantly peers into and past both of these more morally weak people.
I think social is a good word for it. It's sort of the societal masculine.
But what is he? Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's it is something that is narrowed on and sees their fear and vulnerability at a first glance.
It exposes it. I mean, think about the let's say the demands and judgment of the masculine nature of society. Right? Have you put yourself in order? Clearly not, right? Look at these two.
Do you have the character
to present yourself to others
necessary to stand up before this thing, which is the masculine gaze of society that's judging you on your merits,
and has also been capable of great things
and terrible things,
right? And so this is that gaze. That's why I chose it.
Oh, I like that. I hadn't realized that was where you were going with that, but it's a good shot for multiple reasons then.
Yeah, and their eyes are also open.
And their eyes are open.
But yeah, we mentioned that a minute ago. This is they're very conscious of their vulnerability. And so much so that dignity has gone out the window.
I want to point this out that up until now we've had so many scenes of this representation of Oolong's shame and him running to hide, and they're yelling PPP at him and PPP and making fun of him, and he runs and hides and shits himself half to death, and then comes back and he's like, okay, fine, I'll do whatever you want. Beneath the gaze of the Ox King, there is no running in shame. The shame is laid bare right here. He cannot hide it. So I think that's why. I mean, it's also funny that he pissed himself, but I think the reason that he pissed himself is tied to that shame concept.
I think you're starting to grasp that beginning, right? Like, there's the three responses you can have in a situation: fear, flight or fight. You can run away. You can challenge the thing. These two they obviously can't challenge this guy, and they're Oolong's only choice is to stick around, right? I mean, they're so exposed that they've been turned to stone, let's say.
Petrified.
Yeah. By they're petrified by their own measuring up, right? Against this great person.
Against the weight of generational potential
Exactly.
masculinity.
Yeah. Neither of them measures up to it, not even close.
Not even in the slightest bit, you know. And you know, with Oolong peeing himself, there's that idea that, you know, you can also put it up against the way that Goku acts when he's peeing, right? So there's this
Goku would have been more dignified even than this.
Well, obviously.
He would have peed no more than a meter away.
Right. Like, if Goku was so scared that he needed to pee, he would at least drop trowel and pee. He wouldn't piss himself like Oolong does. But Oolong is so ashamed of himself and what this situation says about him that it is all he can do. But
yeah, what's he done for society? What kingdoms and houses and what lives has he set in order?
Well, he has a camper, and he gave Bulma this outfit.
That's why it's so petrifying, because going to Fire Mountain is exactly that. You are measuring up to that. And as young people, I mean, Oolong's not that young, I guess, but measuring yourself up to that is a daunting task.
Well, I would say that also the metaphor of measuring yourself up against it would not work the same way if Fire Mountain was not on fire. If they arrived here and it was a kingdom in order, it would be much easier for them to just benefit from the way that the kingdom is and not have to measure up to it. So walking into the kingdom in chaos, they are confronted with whether or not they are enough to try to put that kingdom in order, in which they are clearly not.
Yeah. Not even Goku.
No, none of them are.
And so we get this first little lie.
Oh, yeah.
So they decide they're going to try and trick. And that's also why I use the gaze, because that gaze is like, you're not going to fucking get anything past me, right?
Right. And I don't even... Trick is a good way to put it, but also the reason that they are lying is because of what they have interpreted the presence of the Ox King to mean. They think that his deeds make him a villain and that they need to lie to escape from a villainy.
Yeah, they think he's a dragon.
Exactly. Well, they think that the deeds of the masculine society represent a dragon.
Toxic masculinity.
Mm-hmm. But as we realize in this episode, they're foolish. I mean, foolish for multiple reasons in this situation. Foolish in their actions and foolish in their assumptions. Foolish to assume that Oolong knows what the hell he's talking about whenever it comes to the value or the danger of this thing.
Right, confronting this. So they decide to lie. And meanwhile, Goku is chilling out, cooling off from his encounter with a force more powerful than him.
Right. This encounter has scorched his tail. I think that this episode is probably going to be where we need to start having the conversation about Goku's tail a bit more. His tail is burned in this episode, and it's not the only time that his tail is going to be relevant. So I kind of dance around Goku's tail in my own analysis because it's difficult for me to nail down just one really specific thing that it is.
I mean, it's one of those big things that I kind of want to cover when we cover the entire season, because you can't talk about this without talking about the giant monkey.
Maybe it'll just suffice for now that we can point out that by this encounter, Goku's tail is burned. Not the rest of him, but specifically his tail gets burned by his attempt.
It should give a little bit of a hint, actually. And this is why I don't think that maybe Toriyama didn't consciously know where he was going with the story, but this is foreshadowing for things that happen way later, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's that brush with a higher level of hierarchy that is what has done this to Goku's tail. Anyways, point being, he's called over by Bluma to help them, and I just like Sun-kun. That's funny to me. Anything else you got to say?
No.
Okay. So here, Goku is going to present himself as always, truthful and forthright, right? And he's going to say that it was too hot for him to get inside the castle. And yeah, we basically covered why that is. But I like how Bulma and Oolong look, because they've just been called out on their lie
Immediately.
And it goes to show you can't use that lies to shape that way around you, although the punishment will not be severe for this, because Goku is going to handle, let's say, what the situation is.
Well, they don't get attacked when this happens. Goku gets attacked and has to deal with the situation. And I think that's just ultimately because of what these characters are kind of representing in this scene.
Right. There's no way that they can even contend. They're out for all intents and purposes. They're here to observe.
Yeah, and I mean also there's this weird sort of this character represents an extension of this character, but not really aspect of it. I think in this situation we have it boils down to a confrontation between hero and the archetypal societal masculine. And so the hero is all three of these characters, right? The hero is Goku Oolong Bulma. And what it's saying about the hero is that if the hero is not...
I don't know about that.
Well, I'll
Go
get
on.
If the hero is not forthright in a situation like this, when they decide to be forthright because they're the hero, then the repercussion of that is that they need to own up to that lack of forthright action, or in this case, the deception. But so that's why it is that Goku is then attacked for being the person bringing that information, because I think that the three of them are sort of a trinity that represents the way to interface with this. Not really a trinity, but sort of
It's interesting you mentioned that. I would like to hear that analysis further on, because I've always really seen Goku as a separate entity, a joined entity, let's say, rather than Pilaf.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't really want to say that like I'm saying that Oolong is an extension of Goku or that Bulma is an extension of Goku. But we do have the feminine and masculine characters standing here before the Ox King and not being forthright, right? And we have the deceptive feminine, the deceptive masculine, and then Goku comes in and is the forthright, good hero. That
The logos, right.
The logos.
That which turns chaos into order.
Mm-hmm.
See, and that's what I was saying before. Even that alone is not strong enough to conquer the societal ills.
Right.
Because the fire is ever burning. And we'll see how it is conquered.
Not this way.
But not this way. So, yeah, here Goku fights the Ox King. And he's not really very successful. This is really the first time we've seen him be unsuccessful.
Right. This is the first time that he's come up against a character or a force that he could not best with his normal approach of, I'm going to fight and defeat this thing. So whenever he attempts to fight with the Ox King is completely unfazed. He is a level of strength above Goku.
I think we briefly need to talk about his design.
Let's.
So, that helmet, I love the goggles. I used to think as a kid they're like so stupid looking, but I love them because they represent what I was telling you earlier with the vision, seeing through those people. The judgment of society pierces right through you, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had never really made a connection to why. I hadn't really thought specifically why his helmet looked the way that it did before at all. But yeah, the helmet is it's multiple things put together, right? It is, well, it's kind of like a Viking helm, right? It's got the two horns branching up off the top. There's a feather in it, a blue feather, and there's goggles attached to it, and we see through those goggles when we first meet the character.
Well, yeah, I want to touch back on what you were saying. So, yeah, it's horned. It's this whoever is wielding this, like, society, right? The judgment of society is threatening. It's a dangerous force, right? But it is also a wise force, right? The feather, the blue feather. It is also a force that is communicated with the logos, right? And so this helmet is so important, and it's very important later on that we see what happens to it as the series progresses. But I also want to point out, he's got pretty fabulous armor. It's golden, and he's got a cape. He's clearly a king, right?
Right.
And so kings are not so easily bested as by a would-be hero, because even now Goku hasn't. The deeds, like I said, aren't there.
Yeah, Goku's not the hero.
He's
as
on
much
the
as
path.
He's heroic.
He is heroic. He's on the path. He's not a hero yet. And I think at the end of this season, we'll be able to talk more about some of these things we're these big topics we're trying to tackle. Because this is a really big episode. It's really dense.
Yeah, well, it's going to be great once we can get towards the end of this season and into the next seasons, where we can start tying in all of these bigger ideas and start saying where they belong in the greater analysis. Because right now it's still just a lot of groundwork. But
still, like I was saying about the helmet, that's exactly it.
Yeah, I mean, I never saw the feather. Right? It just never stood out to me.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like, okay, yeah, he's the Ox King, and there's his Ox helmet, and
that's his connection to the sky, to the logos. That's what separates.
It's literally a
chaos and
feather
order,
that
right?
he wears on top of his head.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
It's an adornment of something that has an elevated perspective.
And so both helmets. That's how very very much a lot of their character, Ox King and Chi-Chi, right? A lot of their character can be emblemized by their helmets.
Yeah, surprisingly so. It's also funny because it never really occurred to me what was up with Chi-Chi and having a helmet whenever she's first seen. Even before I had watched Dragon Ball, I had seen the images of Chi-Chi wearing her armor and her helmet, and I was just like, well, that's kind of weird. That was about it. I didn't really think much further than that. But yeah, it was. It seems much clearer to me now. Also, there's probably something to be said about the feminine and the masculine, and the two horns and the one blade. But I think we'll get to that.
What do you think? Do you have any initial thoughts? Because I don't know what I would say about that.
I'm not sure either. It occurs to me that there might be more on a sort of a deeper, just imagistic, symbolic level about why their helmets work the way that they do and why they look the way that they do. Not just, obviously with the Ox King, but with Chi-Chi's. I mean, if the Ox King's helmet design is as purposeful as it is, then I think that Chi-Chi's helmet may be just as purposeful and will say something specific about what she represents in relation to what the Ox King represents, which is why I was saying that maybe we'll get to that, because we haven't actually dialed into what Chi-Chi is, and I don't think we will for a good while.
Well, and so we can briefly talk about that. I think it's a generational, because that Oh, right. I was just reading the chat. Oh, I lost my train of thought.
Well, it's generational in that.
There we go. It's it's generational, meaning, and I think this is what we'll see and confirm Chi-Chi is representative of, is like the societal maternal, right? The maternal pressures and the maternal judgment of society. Right now she's not. Right now she's on the path.
Well, maybe even the judgment of the maternal is one aspect of it, but it's not like we're seeing this as the wife of the Ox King. This is the daughter of the Ox King. And maybe it's the judgment of like
more
the
like
potential
the bride.
maternal.
Yeah, it's more like a potential.
Well, the judgment of
potential wife, potential maternal.
I think potential maternal is.
It's hard to articulate because I don't think that idea has been very discussed.
I don't think it's been articulated a lot, but it's sort of the gaze of the, of what you interpret to be, maybe your first inkling of what a wife could be. Right? It's like the effect that seeing someone who could represent something on a societal level for you that is also feminine, the effect that has on you might be more along the lines of what's going on with Chi-Chi's helmet. She has...
Well, it's not just that. It's the, let's say, the deal they make later on. We'll talk about it as we get...
Well, I think I'm on the right track because of that. But yeah.
You're on the right track, I would say. Okay, so let's see. Let's go on here. Right, Goku's completely unsuccessful. His best attempts, all they do is slightly annoy.
We don't have a shot specifically. I do want to point out that when at first Goku is not able to damage the Ox King, he decides to jump on the Nimbus and spin circles around him to make him dizzy and then hit him.
Disorient him.
And so I would say that is, metaphorically speaking, that is Goku trying to conquer this situation by just showing off how good he really is. He's just like, if I just act so good that my goodness runs circles around all of society, then I can conquer society. And doesn't change anything.
Right? Like, it doesn't matter how on the path you are.
Exactly.
If you haven't branched, and that's what we'll see in the series, like, if you haven't branched out and spread that, then you haven't done your moral obligation, right? And so here, right, the judgment of society is not going to be disoriented by the actions of a hero. We'll see.
Well, he is a little disoriented. It's just that disorientation
isn't enough,
doesn't weaken him. It's not, that disorientation is not something that will defeat what the Ox King is. Because he gets the little spirals in his eyes and he's kind of like, whoa. But I think that's really just to say that's how good Goku is. But that also at the same time that's not the end-all be-all. Even though it has been up until this point, it seems, we have hit a brick wall for Goku where that can't just be the end-all be-all for his interactions.
Right, and so consequently during their conflict, the Ox King recognizes the Nimbus cloud.
It's a thing now. So he recognizes that he's on the Nimbus, and then his immediate reaction is, how did you get that? Because he knows that he knows by knowing what the Nimbus is, he knows that Goku couldn't just steal the Nimbus and then ride it. So his immediate response is, who gave it to you, right? And then, of course, Goku tells him, because Goku's always just straightforward and honest. And we learn a little bit about the relationship that the Ox King has to the greater story.
It's worth noting as well that the Ox King is seeking the person who gave this to Goku. And what does that say, right? Society, the masculine society, the order of society, let's say, is seeking the spirit that once was responsible for turning chaos into order.
He's seeking the wisdom of the masculine spirit that lies underneath the mode of being necessary to create the kingdom in the first place. I think that he is that he needs to find Roshi, because without Roshi, he would have never been able to create this in the first place, and as such, Roshi is the only person who would be at a high enough level to straighten it out.
I'm getting to a more mythological level here, but we can continue because I think we're going to get into it in the next couple of frames. So, right, he asks him, he tells him Master Roshi here, the Muten Roshi Sama. He also notices his Noibo, right? And actually, I do want to keep it on this one because I want to talk about Master Roshi a little bit more. So, what I'm talking about is how society will cry out for someone to set itself right when it's in danger. Society, in this instance, the paternal societal embodiment in the Ox King, is trying to seek that out, right? Because that's what repairs it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm getting at. Not necessarily Roshi specifically, but which repairs society is what is the
masculine spirit that lies underneath the thing that could create the society in the first place. The sort of deeper masculine spirit. And also, I think that it's Roshi because it is the wisdom in that masculine spirit.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
By what?
Underneath the masculine that creates society.
Meaning that if Ox King is a student of Roshi.
Oh, subordinate to is what you mean.
Right. Well, I say that it lies underneath it in that the way that I'm trying to speak in a mythological context. Instead of being specific, because you're saying you're trying to keep it mythological. So I'm saying that the mode of being that Master Roshi represents and where he is as this masculine spirit that has that at least in the past what represented the force that could teach others to create order from chaos. That wisdom is what society is seeking so that it can be set in order.
Yes. That's what I said.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, that is...
I just wanted to tie it into Roshi's age too, and the wisdom that he represents, not just that it's seeking a masculine force.
No. See, I don't know. Like, I think I don't think the age is necessarily. Maybe the wisdom is. You might
say
be right
age because of it representing the wisdom.
Right.
Roshi
You might be right about the wisdom. But anyways, right. So they're seeking that. The society is seeking that so it can repair itself.
Right.
One other thing I would mention is that it's absent, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's absent. There's no one to fill that void of Roshi. Think about how old...
No, we'll get to that one because that's going to tie into our analysis of the next episode as well.
In the next couple of frames. So the Noibo, the power pole, is instantly recognized. And we know the power pole comes from...
Gohan.
And it represents the ancestral power that's handed down, right?
Right.
And that meaning like the moral foundation that you receive and can rely on throughout your life is a powerful force that can extend beyond the stars.
It is also a force that can carry you because
that's what I'm saying.
Goku actually just arrived with it as a pole vault from that pool of water that he was in. Whenever he gets called over, instead of jumping on the Nimbus to come over, he jumps on the power pole.
He pole vaults,
He vaults himself over. It carries him over here.
But it can do a lot of things. It's very versatile, and that's what that's the ancestral wisdom is a useful thing in a variety of situations. And so it's pointed out here.
It's the utility too. It's like the utility of the ancestral wisdom.
Look how telescopic his little frames look there.
He's peeping.
He's peeping, all right. I can't even see the power pole in this frame. But anyways, but that gets us to our point here about Gohan and about how society is subordinate to ancestry. Gohan was the number one student of the Muten Roshi, who is the an analyzer, let's say, of the force that which turns chaos into order. And from that, right, the ancestry, all the people that have been learning this throughout the years that have produced you, let's say, that is one hierarchy. Underneath that hierarchy should be the judgment and needs of society. And that's what this is telling us right here. Is that what your analysis was?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
It's interesting that they are both also students of Roshi, and that's going to tie into what we think of Roshi. That both that ancestral meta.
Well, Roshi is almost wholly in the spiritual aspect that he's embodying.
Oh, I mean, he lives on an island in the middle of deep ocean. You know?
Yeah, away, and that's the thing. When in your normal day-to-day life, right, you're not interacting with that spiritual. You're interacting with the societal and the ancestral, the familial, even, right? Saying your family should come before society, which is a very anti-communist point of view. So don't ban us, but it is like that's seriously what this is saying.
Right. It's saying that this is the hierarchy of the world.
But not that it isn't important. It is important. It's the second most important.
Well, it's so important that Goku can't damage it.
He can't even put a dent in it, exactly. Anything else you want to say about that?
No, I think we covered it.
Good. This is the realization that you have you've carelessly denigrated a spirit that you don't understand. And I wanted to grab this specifically because she is humbled by the fact that Roshi is someone who has seen her vulnerabilities, right?
And that he's someone so great.
Well, and someone so great, yeah, because he would be someone great if he's teaching. And it's more like, see, I don't think it's so much that he is superseding them on the hierarchy, on a hierarchy, as much as it is like almost a shamanistic approach to the logos, right? They're joined in one, and we'll see that evolve as Roshi shifts throughout this season. But right now, I mean, he's not teaching anyone right now, right? And we're gonna see in the seasons to come how he's gonna kind of change into a more paternal figure, let's say. So, but this is definitely the face of someone who's realized their vulnerabilities have been exposed to someone with clout. So the Ox King wants them to go get the Bancho fan. Well, I would say Chris Sombra, to answer your question there, yes, there is something to say about that. They all had a Dragon Ball, because that's what I'm saying. They're all. I don't want to say that in this instance, in this season, Roshi is superseding them, even though he is their master, let's say, right? They each had a Dragon Ball because they're each a piece of that enlightenment, right?
It's sort of the enlightenment that you can get from the things that all of these different characters represent.
Yeah, so you can inherit one. You can inherit some ancestral wisdom, right? You can gain some wisdom from helping your society, right?
You can gain wisdom from communing with the more spiritual aspects within the self.
Exactly. And that's 3 of them. And then Bluma had 1 from her ancestry, let's say.
The inherited feminine wisdom.
Then where did they get the other one from? Oolong?
Oolong had one?
No, Oolong, the village in Oolong, right?
Well, there was... Wait, where was it in that scene?
The village woman had it.
The village woman, yeah. And so that was the wisdom gained from, that whole situation.
And so we see more of the mysticism here, that Master Roshi just has magic items left and right.
Yep.
I call a phoenix. I call the nimbus.
Magic carpet.
The nimbus. Magic carpet.
And so
the Bansho fan.
That he has the Bansho fan, which is something that the Ox King has heard can put the fire out. So Roshi, this, for the sake of this analysis, we'll say that, and I think shamanistic is a really great way of putting it, because I think that the fact that Roshi inhabits this island out in the middle of the ocean as he does, that the journey that you would make to speak to Roshi is the same sort of journey that you would make, let's say, if you did eat those mushrooms, because it takes you to that place within the self, deep in the subconscious, as he is in the subconscious. And you can take away from him the things that you need to set things right or to destroy things in the world. And so the Bansho fan being not necessarily a fan as much as it is the thing that can put that fire out. And he has heard that you can get that from, that place. Which is to say, go prey on it, figure out how to make your shit right again.
So, yeah, I mean, the Bansho fan is that which heals the ills of society.
Mm-hmm.
So I've heard that that's what Roshi has, who
right.
we've already established, right? So let's continue. So he tells him to go, and he tells him to find his... Okay, he says that he'll gladly give him the Dragon Ball if he can help him do this and get this fire out on his mountain. Now, he also says to go find Chi-Chi, his daughter, that we've met earlier in the episode. But here it's important to note the societal pressure of reproduction already hitting Goku right here.
Mm-hmm. And this is something that Goku has no perception of, right? He's being introduced to the idea, and he doesn't know what the word bride means.
Which is to say, too, that I think it happens to a lot of people. They don't know what marriage entails before they get married. It's hard to know that. Right.
It's hard to know the responsibility that comes with that. And Goku is just now being introduced to the concept of that type of responsibility in the first place. And it's something that he's inevitably, now that he knows about it, it's something that he will have to grapple with at some point.
It's also the one thing the Ox King can offer that neither Roshi nor his grandfather could.
That is a good point. I do like that about the relationship to the Ox King, because it's saying that even though, I will say this, I like this too.
It's the archetypal father-in-law almost.
It's not just that. Goku is not integrated into society. Right. He grew up in that first domain, right? The self-sustaining tier of, or I would say the self-sustaining element of that hierarchy he has already conquered, right? But that isn't to say that he has conquered this tier, which is come to terms with and understands his responsibility within the context of the existence of society itself. Mm-hmm. And that's part of what this Dragon Ball is going to represent, but not totally, because this is going to carry over throughout all of Dragon Ball, I think.
Yeah. All of Dragon Ball for sure, and well into Z.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's why the Ox King is such an important character throughout the entire story. It's because he's that archetypal societal father, not familial father.
Right, and I think it'll be good to sort of delineate this, using the term father and what we mean at different times whenever we say it, because there is, and it harkens back to a biblical nature of saying like God the Father, right? There is a deeper idea that precedes biblical knowledge of the paternal spirit and calling something the Father, because there is God the Father, there is the familial father, there is the societal father, there is, in the same vein, there is the mother that is nature, and on.
Well,
and
right,
on.
we have the familial father, or even the ancestral father, right?
Right, the ancestral, I guess, is a better way.
We
to put
have
it.
the societal, and we have the spiritual in Roshi. We have that holy trinity of paternity.
Exactly.
To guide Goku in the beginning.
Which need to all be addressed to progress in what his character arc is.
Oh, ultimately?
Ultimately.
Yeah. Okay, I was going to say, like, not in this season.
Right now.
No.
Not
right
like
now.
this episode.
All solved right now. So yeah, he sends him, and Goku agrees and says, "Sure, he'll be the bride." And this is what Oolong thinks. Oolong thinks she'll look like this.
So I think it's funny, because this is what Oolong thinks of a bride. This is what Oolong thinks of getting married and settling down and taking the responsibility that society is telling him that he needs to pick up. Because Oolong,
why would I want to marry the judgment of society?
Yeah, or why would I want to live with the judgment of somebody?
Why would I want to? Yeah, exactly. And
so
the harpy-like nature of this imagination is indicative of how he thinks of
a wife.
Yeah, exactly. He wants 30 women from the Dragon.
He wants a harem of 300 women.
300, that's right, 300 women.
He does not want a wife. He wants entertainment. That's why Bulma is entertainment to him. He wants
he wants something to fill the void because he has no direction.
Mm-hmm.
He needs a cure, and so what? He fills it with his perversion.
Right. Well, he, in the same way that Yamcha is filling that void with things, he is treating women like the things that he needs to get to fill that void.
I think we'll get to that, Chris. Chris Sombra.
But yeah, ultimately that's what it comes down to for Oolong, right? Mm-hmm. And it didn't occur to me until now, looking back at the frame, but that's totally what it is. And what's great about this scene too is immediately after this, the Ox King is like, "No, it's cool. I got a picture of her right here," and he shows everybody the value.
We actually have that, yeah.
And Oolong is stunned. He just never believed that what Chi-Chi represents could be attractive.
Right, but it actually and let's speak on that, right? Like,
because this is part of that wisdom that the Dragon Ball is
he was
representing.
thinking true, but what I was gonna say is that he was thinking that what results by following the societal paternal pressures, like being forthright, being responsible, what is that gonna produce? And Oolong thinks is gonna produce like an ugly, homely woman, right?
Yeah, it's gonna produce something that he would not want.
But it actually produces something that is very desirable, I think, especially in these day and ages, right? A traditional wife.
A trad wife.
Trad wife. Chi-Chi trad wife confirmed.
Confirmed.
In episodes.
Not that that's any new hot take for anyone.
No, totally. I mean, not at all. But right, and that is something that now, as a simp extraordinaire that Oolong is, he is going to be simping hard for Chi-Chi. Whoa, she's totally cute, Oolong says. He's outraged because, you know, he thought at first that Goku was getting into a bad spot, so he was laughing in his schadenfreude.
Yeah, his face, he's just like, this dumb idiot.
But now he's been proven wrong again. And it goes to show that his frame is just so off.
Mm-hmm.
And then here maybe we don't. Chris Somber, we'll talk about that in a minute if we don't get
I do have a note of it.
Okay, we'll talk about that on this slide. So not only does Yamcha see the Dragon Ball, but he also sees Chi-Chi's picture. And he knows that he's seen her before. But let's talk quickly about how this is the first time Yamcha's seen a Dragon Ball. He thinks they're so small.
Well, he's simultaneously seeing this Dragon Ball for the first time and realizing the context of what he has done, which is that he has lashed out and knocked out Chi-Chi, who is the potential wife, right? And so he's like, it's this idea that he's like, oh God, like, what have I done? His whole entire wish is about eventually wanting to get a girlfriend.
Right. Now he's disrespected the spirit of femininity.
Disrespected the spirit of the archetypal feminine.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that those two things are happening simultaneously
for a reason, right?
For that reason, and then also,
well, kind of now he's been enlightened, and now he's like, oh, I see the error of my ways.
Well, also, I want to contrast this against the last time he tried to see some Dragon Balls, and all he saw was Bulma's titties.
Go ahead and contrast.
And then here he actually sees the Dragon Ball and has a realization about his relationship to the archetypal feminine.
Right, instead of just
seeing something that he is not ready to understand or that he does not deserve to understand yet because he hasn't earned it. Not that he's earned it here, but I think that the wisdom on display for everybody is self-evident, right? It's not like Oolong has earned the wisdom in seeing the picture of Chi-Chi, but I think that the wisdom of society is self-evident in that sense.
Yeah, it's self-evident. I don't think it's causal. I think it's important they put them together for Yamcha, but I don't think it's causal. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think it's important too that he mentions that they're so small, because one might imagine that wish-granting objects would be big, grandiose things. Especially Yamcha, who has focused so much on the material for so long, right?
Right, and I think that also just kind of harkens back to Journey to the West in that the texts are blank. They're not these, like, they don't have the substance that the characters think that they're going to have. And in the same sense, the Dragon Balls don't have the substance that Yamcha thinks that they're going to have. So he sees them and he's like, oh, they're slight. There's not much to them. Mm-hmm. Right. And so it may cause him to, I don't want to say he's underestimating them, but he could underestimate them because of that.
Sure, but he definitely doesn't underestimate the Ox King.
No, he does not.
So in response, he drives as fast as he can.
I love this frame.
He drives as fast as he can to go remedy the situation.
I feel like it's like every 2 episodes, maybe every 3 episodes, we get back to the art style of giant heads and chibi bodies, and we'll see that at the end of this episode too. It just cracks me up.
Not too chibi, not like fighters.
No. Not bad chibi, but there's a really. I'll point it out when we get to Roche later, but. It's pretty funny. And so, yeah,
he goes to talk to Chi-Chi and see if she's okay, because he really does want to repair his relationship with the archetypal female, as well as avoid the societal judgment. I mean, think about that too. The judgment of society frowns upon damaging the idea the female, right? That's always been the case.
Society definitely does not take kindly to disrespecting the role that the archetypal female plays within it. So Yamcha knows.
Well, I mean, for sure. So, I mean, that had to be the case.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to talk about like evolutionary psychology, someone who would hinder the role that females serve in society would prevent the continuation of the tribe.
Right, it's the conservative element in society.
Right, and Yamcha in his recklessness, his incomplete spirit was so hasty to harm this that he now has to remedy the situation. But I do also have to point out that the fire in the background, it's almost foreboding on Yamcha's choices. Like, this is part of the chaos that you've ensued, right? You're part of
you are part of the chaos right now.
Exactly. So, oops. Then he has to tell Chi-Chi that he is in love with her, and he was so in love with her that he just had to hit her, which she falls for because that she's still naive, let's say. But I wanted to point out this particular picture because it shows both the duplicity and the genuineness of Chi-Chi. Duplicity of Yamcha and genuineness of Chi-Chi.
Mm-hmm.
The genuineness that is found within the archetypal female, right? The willingness to trust. I think that's part of Chi-Chi's character for a reason.
Right, I think that archetypal female, fully embodying fully embodying the role that it plays within society, ultimately needs to be trusting. And
needs to be accepting. I think that's one thing too, because a lot of like hypergamous slant that's happened because of, let's say, Tinder and things, has caused the female to be untrusting and unaccepting of many male advances, regardless, right? Because they can select from all types of hierarchies. Mm-hmm. But this is indicating that they should be more open. But that's the price. Yeah. The price, right?
The price is the Yamcha in the equation here,
the disingenuous,
who, for the sake of preserving himself, is dishonestly manipulating that element of society,
which could even be like the hookup culture. Like, oh, I feel socially pressured to do this, right?
Well, also, there's just that element in society where you see the sort of the older male who is manipulating the trusting younger female and saying what he needs to so that he's just good, right?
Well, in that he can manipulate her into his usefulness.
But not to get anything out of her.
No,
but
for
more
himself.
To stabilize himself with society.
Mm-hmm. And it's not a pleasant experience, you can tell.
Yeah, he doesn't want to. He is embarrassed, and she knows that he's embarrassed, but she doesn't know why he's embarrassed.
She has a guess, but it's wrong.
But it's wrong.
So then we see this amazing shot.
He says, he's like, I'm being serious. Just look at my face. And then we get this great,
it's so indicative. It's exactly indicative of how he feels. And that's what I think Dragon Ball excels at more than some other animated shows, let's say, is the expressions on their faces are so expressive.
The expressions are definitely expressive. And I also want to point out that he's just pointing to the tooth. He just got kicked out.
It's true.
Because he wasn't good.
Right. He's saying, look at me. I'm not good.
Or he's saying, look how genuine I am.
Not.
And points to essentially his scar from grappling with the concept of being that way.
Right. And she's very genuine as well. So it's all coming together. It's all coming full circle for Yamcha here. He's he's showing how truly bad at being duplicitous he is. How bad at deceit he is.
Well, I think that the tooth being gone is part of that. Like it's more difficult for him to be duplicitous in that way because of that.
Because he's been humbled by the fact that he knows he's not all he could be, right? His foundation has been shaken.
Mm-hmm. And trying to, we see here him trying to rely on I would say the way that he appears to be genuine because of the way that he I would say,
well, it's taking advantage of the natural humanity too that people will find in others. But go ahead.
Well, I think there's another element to it in that Yamcha is sort of relying on his ancestral masculinity in being able to, in a situation like this, smile and point at his smile and say, look at me, I'm trustworthy, right? And by going against the wisdom of that ancestral masculinity has damaged the inherent thing that he had leaned on before, right? And so because of that, he can't come off as all that genuine to Chi-Chi. Now, the fact that she's young and the fact that she's embodying a like total acceptance and trust in this time, she trusts him, but she does call the tooth out. She does notice it.
She does notice it, yeah. And so he actually runs away because he sees Goku coming, and he knows Goku can point him out as a sham, both physically and morally.
Yeah, he just can't be around when Goku's around. It's almost like a dichotomy at this point.
Mm-hmm. And so she sees Goku. He says, "Are you Chi-Chi?" Sure, yeah, they all meet, whatever. But then she tries to climb on the Nimbus.
The Numbus.
The Crumbus.
In her attempt to climb upon the Nimbus, she reaches up for support and grabs onto Goku's tail.
Analysis, go.
Goku's tail is his connection to all of his ancestry. It's the unifying thing about him that is, I don't want to say it's allowing him to channel that ancestry, but he is in touch with his nature that in such a way that it is, I don't want to call it a modus operandi, but it is the reason that it is his weakness whenever it is grabbed is because it is his nature, and your nature can be used against you. And I think that Chi-Chi seizing his tail while climbing upon the Nimbus is essentially, she is, to get onto the Nimbus in the first place, she needs to reach out to that nature and establish her relationship with it. And in doing so, of course, Goku is, he's petrified. Not a lot petrifies Goku, but this petrifies Goku, and he falls right off the Nimbus.
So you're saying Goku's weakness in getting his tail grabbed is what exactly?
It is his nature. Like, how do I want to put it? It is. I don't know if it's something that I can articulate yet. But it is not just his nature; it is the nature of his being, because he embodies the the logos, the sort of motivating thing that has carried the species from its inception to here. It's his connection to that. And
I think now you're starting to get there with the species. So right, it is his.
It's hard to just say it's his ancestry, right? It's not just his ancestry. It's like it is the physical representation of his connection to his ancestry in.
It's more of all of his heritage
mm-hmm.
together, right? It's a very strong, let's say not heretical, but it's very hereditary in its way, because it's not just, and we'll see this later on, obviously, but it's not just the familial, but it's the cultural, right? It's the it's all the aspects of, and I don't really want to get too into it, but it's all the aspects of his, if by nature you mean his biological disposition.
Yes. Like his fundamental as a living being nature.
It's more than that. But yes, that's a part of it. It's not.
I point that out specifically because in Chi-Chi's grabbing it and petrifying him, it is his coming into contact with that archetypal feminine, that if he is to honor that aspect of himself, will have to, I don't want to say will have to, it can be controlled and seized by that thing that the archetypal potential wife can seize. It can hold sway over him because it is a part of his biological nature.
So I was going to say, I think that it's there's a little more context to it. So Chi-Chi, in order to bring someone along your own path, because that's what Goku's doing here, right? With the Numbus, let's say. In order to be able to do that, especially with someone who is the archetypal bride, then what's going to happen is that is going to expose the weak, because this is the first time we've seen this as well, right? That's going to expose your weakness to the world, is opening yourself up to that. And that's what he's opening himself up, right? His path, his cloud. No one else has ever ridden on his cloud before. He's opening himself up, and by doing so, it's revealed his main weakness, which is that hereditary weakness, right? That moral weakness that has existed throughout all of your ancestors and people. And we'll get to more specifically. Okay. Right.
So that gives me the context that I need for a lot more. But pointing out that it is his weakness and then tying it back into that really solidifies what I think about it, because it is we'll talk about Young when we get there, but that weakness that Goku, at least right now, cannot escape.
Mm-hmm.
And
so we'll just leave it at that. I don't want to get too far into it, because I've already said too much.
I think that stepping another step back from the literal kind of has contextualized it better, and that's why
I've given away too much to Brok. This is outrageous.
Oh no,
I take it back.
I was pretty
Brok,
close.
Now you don't know it.
I was pretty close already, though.
You were getting there.
But yeah, that contextualizes why this happens the way that it does with Yamcha watching, as Yamcha spends this entire episode just watching everything happen.
And so he sees that Goku's tail is his weakness.
Mm-hmm. And he is like, that's it. That's what I need to know.
He's going to exploit it, right. So, and that's kind of the young revolutionary or rebel's way of thinking, right? Like, here's the weakness in this moral character. Let me tear it down by using that.
Right. And it's like, let me manipulate this one thing and then use that to destroy the idea of good in this sense.
Exactly. And so, yes, Goku is powerless in that instance because there is nothing you can do about your past. And by that I mean your inherited past. There's nothing about you can do of what your ancestors did. That's why Goku's powerless. Just what I wanted to hear. Time to grab it with my Wolfang fist.
And of course, he says, in English, he says, what I'm going to do.
I'm going to grab his tail with my...
I'm going to grab that tail with my Wolfang fists.
And then in Japanese, he says he'll use his Wolfang fist to steal... What? I want to see this happen. I want to see him approach just the 4, 5, 6 Dragon Balls sitting there and just Wolfang fist them.
One by one.
It's the solution for all problems. I can't wait for the infomercial. Yamcha's there. My patented Wolfang fist.
Have you been having trouble opening jars lately?
Have you been having trouble turning on your faucet? Well, that's a job for your Wolfang fist.
Are you struggling with the idea of being all that you could be?
That's a job for your Wolfang fist.
You just grab that monkey tail with your Wolfang fist. Don't even need to be good.
But anyways, so we see Goku and Chi-Chi traveling along. Goku decides to investigate whether or not Chi-Chi is a boy or girl. Now, we've already established that this is his level of discernment that he's been developing over time.
It's his literal discernment.
It's his literal discernment. So now this is the discernment that there are different... Like, we've already seen that there are different masculine forms. We've seen that he has come across Oolong not being a masculine form to follow, even though he had Gohan, who was. And now we see, instead of Bulma, because Bulma's never been, let's say, a romantic relationship for Goku. But now we see that his discernment has increased one more degree. His insight has increased one more. He's able to discern women now because he has interface with society. He's able to discern what makes a bride and what makes not a bride, let's say.
Categorically.
Yeah, he can categorize that now for a mate, let's say.
And not just that. This is his he is also, I'm pretty sure he hasn't done it at this point, but this is the first time he is discerning the feminine nature of somebody who is similar to him, like his size and age. Right. And so he's now able to make the connection.
Well, no, he did it a tad bit in Oolong's village.
That's why I was doubting. I couldn't remember if he did it or not.
It was just for like a second. It's like not even. It's just a little tidbit of it.
Mm-hmm. But I think in this instance, the similarity between them, right? I think that they work as this mirror of each other. And so his discernment of the of her vulnerability and her nature, and what that means as a reflection to him is an important point for his character.
And so it is. And he says, I was right, you don't have a wiener. You're a girl. And his level of discernment, his eyes are wide open.
His eyes are so open.
To absorb new information. He's now one level above. But Bulma is a little, let's say, anxious that Goku's going to take some improper steps. And perhaps it is improper to interface with the societal female in the way that Goku does. But it is his interfacing with society that allowed him to take those steps in the first place. So Bluma's worry here is significant, but no harm is really going to come out of it. I do think it's funny that she is already so familiar with his nature that she can pretty much guess what he's going to do. Any words on this?
No, I think that's a pretty good summation of it. And of course, she's not exactly into it. The archetypal societal female's response to this situation is, I guess, what you would expect it to be.
But not Bulma's. Yeah. Oh, that's what you mean. Yeah, I see. Yeah.
Which is...
But the archetypal bride, right?
Well, I actually wasn't talking about this, since her initial response is to be shocked and then to shove him off the Nimbus and say, "You did something really bad."
She did. So let's quickly speak on that.
She discerned that behavior on the societal level and that behavior towards the potential bride she just called it bad. Said that what he did was bad and shoved him off the Nimbus. However, even though societally speaking, what he did was bad, then the narrator, and this is not in the English version, this is only in the original, narrator says, quote, "However, now that she had been kicked there, she felt that her only choice was to become this boy's wife."
Right, and that's the forward approach and the monogamous inclinations that society, and particularly the potential bride of society, has, right, in a healthy society, let's say.
Right, and I think this is also a reflection of this idea that that this archetypal sort of, if you want to flip it, the archetypal to her potential husband has discerned her, and as such she knows now that he is, not because of the specific actions that have happened, but in encountering what Goku is, then she knows that is who she wants to be with because of because of how good he is and how,
even though he did something bad in the eyes of society, right? He did something forthright and truthful, which is the redeeming quality.
Right. And
that's what redeems.
And because of the nature of Chi-Chi, in that she is forthright and being honest, even though she understands what he did on a societal level is wrong, she also recognizes the virtue in Goku to the extent that from that point on, she knows that he is ideal for her.
Precisely. She's able to see that.
So even though it's goofy that he kicked her in the crotch, and then because of that she had to be his wife, it might mean a little bit more.
There's
than
a point. And so here it is. Chi-Chi's overjoyed because that is the calling of all brides. All brides are happy to be married, or to and all, like, so many little girls dream of getting married, that this is just kind of that elation over the fulfillment of that basic societal and biological urge.
Mm-hmm.
It also removes some of that chaos in your life of trying to find a mate if you've already decided that by interfacing with society you will find one.
in a forthright way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and also this, I think the this face she's making is because she calls Goku dear, and then Goku turns to her and asks her, why are you calling me that? Why you keep calling me dear? And she's like, oh, no reason, you know. So we just have this kind of funny interplay where she has already, like, she's gone all the way down that road to the idea of being his wife, even though she's just a little kid, as Yamcha has said, right?
But but I think the whole point though of Chi-Chi is that she is the potential bride.
Mm-hmm.
She is for that future. Because I mean, she is a kid right now, and no one should be looking at her as a bride right now. But in the future,
right? I think the concept of potential also in an analysis like this is a very concrete thing. Like, we'll be talking about this is potential this is potential that, this represents potential.
Yeah.
It's going to be all throughout. So a character representing a potential thing, that potential is a very strong element of that.
Yeah, and she is the potential bride, so it's reciprocal. The joy is reciprocal when you decide that you will interface with in a social way, or in a society. We live in a society.
We do
if
live
you
in a
decide
society.
to interface in a society forthrightly without the intention of achieving or attracting a mate, because that's what Goku's doing here. He's just on his path. He's not trying to, like, he's not doing what Bulma and Yamcha are doing, which is it's so ironic that this just happens for him, and they're like spending their whole energies searching for what is actually kind of right in front of them. But we'll get to that. But I mean, when you've decided that you are just going to act in a good way, then that will follow, and society will be happy to reward you by it. And
right.
That's what this is.
The potential, sort of the potential bride in society will recognize that and will value it.
All right, I think we said enough about that. We're getting ready for the end here. So I think this is the last one before our preview.
Mm-hmm.
So they go to meet Master Roshi, who is sweeping his island. He's just chilling there with his disembodied conscience.
I like this implication, like in the first season, where it's like Roshi doesn't have anything to do. He's just like waiting for...
No, there's a point. There's a point to that.
Yeah, he's waiting to interface.
No. He's decided not to interface. His interaction...
I mean, he is in a state of potential interface, and he is like in standby because he's not interfacing. So like he's sort of like exists when people are interacting with him. So it's just like they show up and he's just like, I'm being on my island still.
I think that's also because right now he is that spiritual father, right? So we can't...
That's why I said just in this first season.
We can't really peer too much into his workout videos quite yet.
Not yet, no. But early it's funny because he's just like...
I see
the idea that he wasn't up to anything. He's just being on the island. It's like, what are you going to do just being on the island? Like, sweep the island.
Sweep the island. Exactly. So they go meet him, and he asks him, I think he's like, oh, is this the boy that I gave the keen tone to? Mm-hmm. And here he is, the Muten Roshi.
Big-headed Roshi.
So we'll talk more about Master Roshi next time. And here's our little preview. So next time we'll see the real power of the wisdom of your spiritual fathers, let's say.
Mm-hmm. And like it or not, this is what the ideal male form looks like.
This is peak masculinity right here.
Peak performance.
But we want to just, in closing, do you have anything to say to summarize this episode? I'll go back to this slide real quick before we get to our outro.
Well, before we get to that, I think I'll just throw in a couple of things from notes.
Yeah, please do.
maybe just a few funny things. For one, I'd like to come back to what Cassandra had said earlier about the storm in the desert. So it is interesting to point out maybe that the context of the storm might be a reflection of where the storm is happening, which is, of course, in the desert, right? So, like, what the storm can represent doesn't always necessarily have to, reflect on the person, but in this instance could be a reflection of that it is a force that is being directed poorly towards the self, when that energy could be directed outward, outside of the castle, to actually create a positive change. Right, that scrutiny, and because like that force of scrutiny that can criticize and say when something did not succeed is the force of scrutiny you would need to create something out of the desert, or to create something in a desert-like situation for yourself and for others.
Yeah, it's like conscientiousness, right? The conscientiousness that keeps you in line, keeps you disciplined.
Conscientiousness. Conscience. That's where I'm trying to go with it, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's like that conscientiousness can be turned inward.
Yes.
To the degree that it burns you out.
Right.
But that conscientiousness could be outward.
But it only is if you're not learning your lessons, which he is not.
Which he's not.
His lessons. He's just beating up the aspects of himself, like, why didn't you... And like I was saying earlier, like, why didn't you study harder? Why didn't you, like, I don't know. Why didn't you read the book more or something like that? Like,
right. Rather than addressing what about the fact, what could be learned about the fact that you did not succeed, rather than the response that is happening, which is to just turn that discernment on the self, or turn that conscientiousness on the self, and
or perhaps it could be someone who is doing a job improperly, that is getting frustrated at the fact they're doing it improperly, instead of facing the fact that they're not doing it properly. Like Christmas Vacation, one of Brok's favorite films.
It is a good film.
Repeatedly in that film, Clark Griswold gets very upset and kind of burns himself out, because he consistently fails to see the errors of what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of exactly what Pilaf does, over and over.
Right. Well, I mean, that element of it, I think we've touched on. I'm more interested in the sort of interface between the storm and the desert, and what that can say more about the responsibility that Pilaf could have if he were to act in the way that he wasn't doing that.
Right. And I mean, I think that goes to what we were saying about the exercising and the divinity, like the lightning divinity of Pilaf's ego, like the divinity of the Logos to create order out of chaos is being used in a perverted way where it could be turned outward. And I mean that you basically said it. I think that was pretty much it. I mean, I just didn't mention it because I think when we were talking about it, right, I was basically saying he was using it on himself.
Right. I do think that there's I think that the fact that it's lightning too, and the role that bright lights seem to play throughout this entire series, it's sort of this like it's a force of enlightenment. Technically, he is not using it to gain enlightenment. He is just attacking himself with it. And it's like that force that would bring enlightenment instead is just burning him.
Because it's being perverted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that, and I think that it's a storm in the desert also.
And that's kind of part of that's part of the unholy trinity, I would say.
Oh, yeah.
Is that deceit and arrogance of trying to control the divinity to destroy yourself, instead of learning from your own mistakes.
Definitely, yeah. I think that I think now I have a better grasp on why, specifically he's just like, I'm going to conjure a storm.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it seemed really odd to me when we were getting into the
conversation. Yeah, I know you were really
well, it's like it has
curious
to mean
about
something.
it. Right, yeah. No. And that's the thing.
And we've seen this happen in the show at different times. Like the hands could just electrocute them.
Mm-hmm.
So.
But also, it's something that that's reinforced what I said more and more about how I don't think we're going to ever really be able to speed up too much on these episodes.
Yeah. No, it's been pretty surprising because I obviously wasn't going to be able to put this analysis together on my first viewing, but
I'm interested to talk about that a little bit. Why were you so certain that you'd be able to tell me my analysis?
Because I didn't know your analysis was this.
Oh, okay. What does that mean though?
Because I thought it was broad strokes. I thought that once I had finished watching Dragon Ball, then I could piece together like, oh, okay, this character kind of represents this character, and like on a more broad scale. I didn't think that I would be going episode by episode and actually finding commentary on the nature of existence in Goku kicking Chi-Chi in the crotch and Yamcha staring at Bulma's tits. Like,
I mean, I don't blame you, but I also don't say like, this is really good for no reason.
No, I'm figuring that out. I think at this point I figured that out.
Anyway, so.
But yeah, I you could say that I was a little bit arrogant in in thinking that I could put this analysis together on a first viewing and then give it back to him. I didn't realize what he really meant.
It was just a side conversation happened like right here.
Yeah.
You were like unloading stuff.
Well, I was just really into that type of analysis, and then I was like, I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah. But it's deep. And that's the thing. I think it goes beyond what a lot of what Dr. Peterson has talked about in some of his analysis on different like Disney movies.
It definitely does. I mean, I've read Maps of Meaning, but that is not enough.
But this goes farther.
Yeah.
This talks about some stuff in Maps of Meaning for sure.
Yeah, it comes up, but there are some other books I need to read, I know. Not just some.
Joseph Campbell.
There are quite a few that I know I need to read. Mm-hmm. But that's I think this has also just been a really encouraging process to tell me like, yeah, you really should read those books. Like you really do have a lot more that you could learn about this. So it's been it's great. It's a great experience to not have it instead. And basically be shown like, yeah, you can try very hard to have that analysis, but you still have a lot to learn.
And I mean, for me, it's actually, like I said last episode, it's a very positive experience for me as well, because I was under the impression that I had nothing important really to say, that people couldn't puzzle out for themselves. Apparently not.
No, I mean, if you've heard this before, then feel free to tell Owl that he's just talking in circles. But so far, I haven't met anyone who has thought of any of this. So,
well, I don't know. It's something that it just kind of clicked. But anything else particular about this episode?
Let's see.
Because I think we'll have more to say at the end of next episode. Because I want to tie up some stuff at the end of next episode.
Not a whole lot, little thing here and there. I think it's funny whenever Goku tells Chi-Chi that she needs to have a pure heart or she has to be. I think maybe he says pure heart. To be able to ride the Nimbus, she says, "My heart's as clean as a flush toilet."
That's right. Yeah, I didn't get that one.
Which is pretty funny. I don't think there's much to it, but it's pretty funny.
It's a humbling thing, right? It's not like a really.
Well, I just think it's funny that she's not
embarrassed, right?
Yeah, it's like she's not like, my heart is as pure as a rose or as
freshly fallen snow
or spring water. It's like, no, as a flush toilet. It's part of the really funny humor to Dragon Ball that cracks me up every episode. Coming across that and then understanding that Toriyama had to have at least a cursory knowledge of what he was writing about, so these jokes they're not landing the way that they could for people. They're so funny to make fun of these ideas.
They're really funny though. I love them.
I think it's funny that Chi-Chi calls Yamcha shy.
Yes, we talked about that.
That's
briefly.
what Bulma likes about Yamcha as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Well, specifically using
and
the word shy.
That's interesting to see that Yamcha really is not shy.
Yeah, but that's what these female characters want to see in him.
And so that's what they see. They see what they see. Especially Bulma, who's willfully ignorant.
Another funny line, Goku, whenever Chi-Chi grabs Goku's tail, he says, "You grab my tail. I lose all my strength when someone grabs it." And she says, "Oh my, why do you have a tail?" And he says, "I just do. I can't help it." Funny line.
Yep, you can't help it.
You can't. Well, it's not funny unless you're really thinking about the tail. And then it's like, oh, that's pretty funny, actually.
Yeah.
I think that's we've covered pretty much everything else that I took a note on.
Perfect. Well, then we can go ahead and conclude. On the next episode, episode 8, we're going to be talking about the Kamehameha wave and all of its divine glory.
The Kamehameha? Is that what you're saying?
Kamehameha wave.
Huh.
Kamehameha.
I can't wait to find out what that is.
Yeah, I've never heard of it before. But it's going to be a blast because it's a really, really important thing that comes up over and over in this series.
Oh, I'm sure it'll be a blast.
Oh, it'll be a blast and a half, but we'll also see the Muten Roshi here.
And his
interface for the first time in a while.
We'll see him off the island doing shit.
So if you like this episode, you liked what you heard, make sure you subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. Smash, obliterate, annihilate.
Crush the like button.
Just punch your monitor. Don't even click it with your mouse.
Put your mouse over the button and then break your computer. That's the only way. And
but
get
seriously,
one,
we appreciate
and then get another
who's
computer
watched,
so that you can watch this
now or in the future, and know that we're gonna continue improving. Hopefully, our technological side. We've started learning how to schedule the streams and things. We also might be moving to some alt tech very soon, or we might be just streaming on both platforms at once. Haven't decided yet. So stay tuned for some of those updates. But this was Get the Mic episode 7, the Ox King on Fire Mountain. I'm Owl. I'm your host on the left.
I'm Brok. I'm your host on the right.
And we'll see you next time.